tidings, ladies and gentlemen of the Lodge, and welcome back. Today we are serving up some more Kingdom Hearts content, keeping us revolved around the old man Xehanort himself. So as we know from the ending of Dark Road, Xehanort was sent to Destiny Islands to be hidden away from the darkness until he was strong enough to face it. But what if I told you there was another reason hidden between the lines? Let's start with this. Obviously, we see his arrival at Destiny Islands is quite deliberate, and it seems to be part of a much grander plan, be it on behalf of the Master of Masters or the Dandelions. So it begs the question, what other reason could there be for Xehanort to go to Destiny Islands, and whose idea was it? Well, sickos and normies, buckle up because I believe that I very well may have cracked the case. So let's back up a second and allow me to try and connect these dots. We have a baby Xehanort who's brought to Destiny Islands. He's raised into a teenager before making his way back to Scala and Kylum, where the events of the Dark Seeker saga essentially commence. Upon Xehanort's arrival to Scala, there doesn't seem to be any coalition that feels he doesn't belong here by any means. No one seems to be raising any red flags. After all, if Xehanort was to be kept from Scala and Kylum indefinitely, at all costs, then the same organized collective that was there to meet Brain would have for sure passed this message down through the generations that if Xehanort were to ever return, that it should be considered a problem. But if anything, nobody in Scala seems to be raising any red flags about Xehanort being around. Now again, with bloodlines, legacies, and data being passed down through the ages, it not only appeared that Xehanort was welcomed into Scala with open arms, but there was an entire system set up that he could settle into. Also, speaking of bloodlines, what are the odds that they would set him up to be classmates with Ericus? We have Brain, who is Ericus's ancestor, and Ephemer, who is Xehanort's ancestor, two former classmates, and now their descendants have been set up to also be classmates. Again, you have to consider, what are the odds that when Xehanort finally does make his way back to Scala at Kylum, he happens to be the same age and in the same class as Ericus, who, as we know, Brain's ancestor, while Ephemer, Xehanort's. It's all starting to seem like this was a deliberate setup. So ultimately, sending Xehanort to Destiny Islands wasn't just about keeping him away from the darkness, but I believe it was simultaneously about propelling him forward through time. Let's not forget that especially with young Xehanort, his number one main motif is time. So wouldn't it be fitting if from the very moment Xehanort was born, time was what his destiny was concerned with? As we have learned from the Kingdom Hearts lore, every world spins on its own separate time axis. So for example, 1 year's passing in one world might only equal 1 day's passing in another. So again, what do we see here? Xehanort is born in this more rustic-looking Scala at Kylum, gets sent to Destiny Islands where a little over a decade passes, but when he returns to Scala, the whole place looks different from top to bottom. This to me does not appear to be a little over 10 years time passing in Scala. This looks to be 100+ years or more. The entire city has been overhauled top to bottom and has a completely different stylistic aesthetic than the city Xehanort was born in. So, knowing this, it would appear to me that we can conclude, whether it be the Master of Masters plan, the Dandelion's plan, or maybe even Old Man Xehanort's plan himself. But whoever's bright idea this was, it seems apparent to me that the results and outcomes speak for themselves. Xehanort gets sent to Destiny Islands as a baby to be hidden away from the darkness until he is strong enough to face it. After a little over 10 years pass, Xehanort makes his way back to Scala at Kylum, where it looks like over 100 years or so have passed. At the very least, more than the time Xehanort spent on Destiny Islands. So not only does Xehanort find himself coming to a future Scala at Kylum, he ends up at a time and place where he is the same age as Ericus. Not only that, Lushu, disguised as Bragi, is there to watch him as well. So seeing as Xehanort not only made it to a future Scala at Kylum, but one where both Ericus and Lushu were there, you would have to believe that when it comes to Xehanort's return to Scala, timing was key. Again, one more reminder, one of the biggest themes for Xehanort is time. So the idea that his very birth and destiny involved propelling him through time would be quite symbolically fitting. Seeing as Kingdom Hearts is placing more emphasis on things like the world order and each world having a separate time axis, it wouldn't be too far-fetched to believe that Xehanort would fall right into place. So with that said, I'm curious to know what you all think. There are still so many unsolved mysteries with Xehanort, but I believe when it comes to him being raised on Destiny Islands, I cannot help but think the main purpose would have to be time itself. So do you agree or disagree? Be sure to let me know in the comments below. Anyway, be good to yourselves and each other, ladies and gentlemen, and I will see you sickos and normies next time.